Hi there. Thanks for joining in. Welcome. If you're a fairly new subscriber, thank you to everyone actually for hitting the subscribe button. It's always such a just pure delight when I see that people have subscribed. I've been a booktuber for almost a year. My first video was last October, like mid-October. So I'm really looking forward to that 1 year mark and just reflecting back on what it's like to talk about books on a video and be in this conversation in this way with all of you lovely watchers. And of course, I'm a prolific booktube watcher myself, and that's also been a joy, just discovering new booktubers along the way. I'm going to talk about 2 books that I finished. I'm recording this now because I'm about to go away on a trip, and so there might be a delay in the next video that I post just because of being away, coming back, getting some thoughts together. So if you see a delay, then you'll know why. But I want to talk about these 2 books because I don't want to forget about the impact that they had on me. And one of them, you've seen it before, I've been reading it. It's Rosamond Lehmann's debut novel, Dusty Answer. This was published in 1927, and there is a quote at the beginning of this book by George Meredith, and this is where the title of the story comes from. Ah, what a dusty answer gets the soul when hot for certainties in this our life. So now I understand it better. I read this when I was away, when I first got this book in New Orleans, but I understand it because I understand why it fits the story. I understand why it's here in this book, because Judith, our main character, our protagonist, is a young woman, only child. These are upper class people, and she's like any young person, she's trying to figure out her life, and she's realizing that you don't really figure it out. You make plans, who knows what happens to those plans. So that's what, when you're hot for certainties in this life, you're actually going to get a dusty answer. I just think that's so clever. Okay, I am blown away by this book. Like, it actually might be one of my favorite reads of the entire year because of its progressiveness, because of the voice of Judith, because it feels so modern to me. I mean, of course, it's of its time, so it's definitely of its time, but I appreciate how modern Rosamond Lehmann is writing, how progressive she is. This is a story that contains some, I wouldn't even say hints, but some talk of queer relationships. So there's what it feels like, at least a companionship that's mentioned between 2 young women later in the book, and then one of the characters, one of Judith's friends that she grows up with next door, this group of cousins, is, I feel, more than hinting that he's drawn to men. And the progressive part, well, that's progressive enough, but the progressive part is they're taking these facts in stride. That's what to me feels like the modern part. This is about Judith, who lives next door to a house that has a lot of cousins in it. I think it's 4 boys, 1 girl, and they share a governess. She's an only child, and she longs to be in the mix of these cousins, and she adores some of the, if not all of, but maybe like 2 or 3 of the male cousins. And at one point later in life, when she's about to go to college, they all come back to this house, which has been abandoned for a while because one of the female cousin is now a widow, and she's bringing her son, and Judith is now able to see all these cousins again after years of not seeing them. And this is really where the story picks up. And she starts to have feelings for one of the cousins, Roddy. What we don't know, but we could probably surmise, is some of the other male cousins have feelings for her, but maybe it's not straightforward. We learn a lot about Roddy, but not entirely. Judith is having her eyes open about how complicated human beings are, and how this romantic idea she has is probably not going to be straightforward. Then she goes away to Cambridge, and she's a little bit confused about whether Roddy or her will ever have a relationship, but she just gets swept up in this girls' part of Cambridge and really has this platonic love affair and develops this relationship with a girl named Jennifer that is life-changing for her, just life-changing. And that's such a beautiful part of the book. This is where a lot of the great writing comes in for me. Then Judith goes back home, and she sees the cousins again, and the story picks up about the cousins from there. I've marked so many pages. I could just read pages that I've marked here forever, but I won't, because it's going to take me too long to find what the amazing quote it was that I wanted to share. I was so captivated by this book, and because of the modern progressive approach, that I looked it up. I have my laptop here, so I hope you don't mind if I read something. And it says that when British publishers Chatto and Windus accepted Lehman's first novel, they had modest hopes of success. They said it probably wasn't going to make any money. It was, of good quality, but they didn't think that it was going to find the right audience. It had a okay review from The Spectator. It said, "This is indeed one of the most charming and convincing studies of young womanhood that we have read for some time, but the story is too sad for popular taste." So that didn't do her any good. Then a week later, it says the Sunday Times ran a review that was super positive. It says, "It's not often that one can say with confidence of a first novel by a young writer that it reveals new possibilities for literature. But there are qualities in this book that mark it out as quite the most striking first novel of this generation. The modern young woman, with all her frankness and perplexities in this semi-pagan world of today, has never been depicted with more honesty or with more exquisite art." It says in this is from the Paris Review in 2017, it says in there that this was like a huge boom for Rosamond Lehman. And I know from listening to the Backlisted podcast that her, it's called The Weather in the Streets, is supposed to be like just a wonderful novel. So I have that pegged as definitely a book that I'll get to of Rosamond Lehman's. Such a beautiful edition, one of these Penguin Oda Nil. Love it. All right, the second one that I'd mentioned in another video is this Rebecca West, The Return of the Soldier. This painting that they chose is such a perfect depiction of what I feel is the room that the novel opens up in. So this one was the one that was published in 1918, and it had like really good reviews, critical reviews in the beginning. It said that it had a realist level of detail, and then it just fell out of popularity, it seems like, until it started to get republished. But this is so World War I is in the background, and but far away from where this novel is taking place. This is a house out in the country, and this room depicts where the novel opens up, which is a nursery. So the main character, Jenny, the protagonist, is living with her cousin's wife, Kitty, while Chris, the cousin, is off to war. There was a baby between Chris and Kitty, and I don't mind saying this from the beginning because this is the first scene, is that it opens up in this very sparse nursery without the baby. So you can surmise from there what's happened, the sad scene that happens when Jenny and Kitty are talking about the fact that the baby Oliver is not there anymore. It's not with them anymore. And Chris is off to war. What's interesting is, so thinking about the fact this is Rebecca West's first novel, is the way that she chose to make this plot about hearing, like getting any kind of updates about Chris and how he's doing and whether he's still alive or whether he's been injured, that sort of thing. The way that they receive news about Chris could have been in a much straighter line, but Rebecca West chooses a not straight line, and she chooses a more nuanced, more complex way for the news to come to them or not come to them or be delayed because the news about Chris being injured in a way goes to someone else. That whole plot line then brings in another person, a very important person into this story, and this person is Margaret. And that's all I'm going to say about that. But the way that Margaret is used as a plot device to move the story forward, but also to actually change Jenny. I don't know whether it eventually changes Kitty. In that respect, we don't know. But it definitely changes Jenny. And she, I think, learns that you can't go by first impressions. This is not a simple life we're living here in wartime. Chris's situation isn't simple. What's going on here with Margaret now in our lives is not simple. And I can learn something from that. I can learn from being open to a more expansive way of thinking and not closing my heart and having judgment about things in such a quick way. This is a different world we're living in now. It's like 100 pages and so impactful. So impactful. So I highly, highly recommend this. And, you know, it's September, so I guess could be obviously shorty September book. And then, I'm still reading this little guy, Jerusalem the Golden, which is the Margaret Drabble book. The cover came off. I think this was written in the late 1960s. It's one of those orange penguins. I don't know too much about this book yet. It has a main character named Clara, and what I'm getting into now on page 44 is Margaret Drabble does these character studies so well. I'm loving the couple pages she's taking, pages, to describe her mother. Her mother, not a simple person. And Margaret Drabble takes the time to not just describe the mother, but to actually give you through examples what her mother is like, at least through the eyes of Clara. So that's all I know about that. What am I looking forward to as I try to think about what books I want to take on this trip? Two things. One, I picked up from the library Tom Lake by Ann Patchett, the new Ann Patchett. I was thinking, my days of Ann Patchett are over. I read Ann Patchett in the 90s. I just don't think I'm an Ann Patchett, popular fiction person anymore. So I wasn't even going to keep this when it came in at the library as a hold. I was just going to say, no, put that back. I've decided I don't want to read this right now. Then this weekend, I started reading it. And other than like the first scene, which is kind of going back in time by the narrator is an older woman who has two daughters in their 20s. And they're all at this like lake house place. And she's telling them about her early life in college or high school, college. Other than that, like all of a sudden I was in the book and I didn't realize like 20 minutes had gone by. Like that's a good sign is all I can say. I may be taking this on the trip, even though I just don't like to take clunky hardbacks with me, but this might be the one that I choose. Oh, by the way, I checked myself on the Ann Patchett thing, and it turns out I've never read any of her fiction. I must be thinking of someone else, but I can't think of who the someone else is. I thought maybe it's Alice Munro. No, never read an Alice Munro either, so I'm still thinking about that. But I did read her book called, it's a memoir. It's about her and her friend Lucy, called Truth and Beauty. That's stunning. That is a stunning piece of writing. Really, really great. Gut-wrenching, just fantastic writing. All right. Then, if I make it to the library before I leave, which I probably will, there's 2 books they have on hold for me. And gosh, I wish I could remember where I found the name of this one. So, Binstead Safari by Rachel Ingalls. Someone I watched had been talking about a Rachel Ingalls book. It's an interesting book. It was written in the 80s, and it's about this guy, this academic anthropologist. He's British, and he's off to East Africa to do some research. And just to put it in a little nutshell, it's something about his wife. He's a cad, and it's something about his wife having this like huge awakening, sexual awakening, just overall awakening, because she goes on this trip with him. I don't know. We'll see. And then I am getting a Flor Yaghi, an author, Italian it must be because it's translated from the Italian. I am getting in from the library Sweet Discipline, finally. I kept forgetting to ask for that. It was published in the 90s. It's her first book in English, so her first translated into English book. And all I could see is that it's about obsessive love and madness in post-war Switzerland. But I've heard a couple booktubers talk about this, and it's made me really curious. Is it too strange? I don't know. We'll see. That's all I have. I can't wait to hear from all of you about any of these authors and your reading experiences. So do join in the conversation. Again, if I don't post a week from now, whenever this is up, you'll know why. It's just a delay from traveling and getting back. Thanks for joining in, and I'll talk to you later.